I work in the character space among a bunch of other things. And how I originally got involved in character was going way back to when I joined the military as a young soldier. And in the military, we have very crystal clear laser insight on leadership. And most people that haven't spent any time in the military really do feel that we have the best leadership, but it's not a continuum like that. You get the best and the worst sometimes. But there's a bunch of tenets in military leadership that really do connect very closely with character. After my military service, I went back to school and then ended up joining the public service. And my first job was disability service manager. So I was leading a team of medical adjudicating experts that were making critical judgments and decisions on whether or not somebody was deemed permanently disabled. And I didn't know anything about this field. I'm not a medical expert, but I had to understand what that adjudication process is. And at the same time that I had started that job, I had started my executive MBA at Ivy and was introduced to the character model with Mary Crossan as my professor. And it really, really resonated with me because judgment is at the center of the wheel. And these people are making critical judgments that are going to decide the rest of somebody else's life. So it was interesting with my work there because I was really trying to understand how these judgments were made. I started reading about Kahneman and how human beings make judgments, and Noah Yuval Harari and his work on where we came and evolved to as human beings. And all of these things sort of shape my perspective of maybe we can make better judgments by not just building our capacity in competence, but in character as well. So I've also been able to teach organizational behavior and performance, where I've really adopted the character model into my teaching and practice. And again, it sort of ties back into that whole military past of being self-aware to build self-reflection, and situational awareness comes from that self-reflection and self-awareness piece. So, it really resonated with me quite a bit. Getting my foot into the medical adjudication field and into that area of judgment really started me on a different trajectory. Once I started to take a deep dive in human judgment and human decision-making, it really led me down an HR path, which I didn't have before. You're not really deciding on one resume being better than the other when you have people in front of you with all kinds of accolades and MBAs and CPAs. It comes down to the person that you're looking at. So I've had a lot of experience in senior executive appointments where character matters, and adopting the character framework and assessment has been something that I've become quite an expert in, and also have learned so many lessons along the way about how difficult that is. So I really get a lot of value out of developing my own character. And it comes down to a very simple thing of reflecting back on all the mistakes that I've made in my life. And to be very honest, I've made a lot of mistakes. And for a very long time, I didn't learn from those. It's really, truly difficult to learn from, your past mistakes. But once you start into this character space, it becomes, well, it's still difficult, but it becomes easier. It becomes exciting at a point of growth as opposed to a point of pain. And it's been empowering, right? As soon as you take ownership of something, this journey of developing your character, you can do something about it. And character can change and grow and strengthen. And I've seen that in myself. I've seen it in the relationships that I have both with people and the people that I work with, the opportunities that are in front of me, and the level of excellence in what I've been able to accomplish is directly attributed to this whole self-development piece. And that's the interesting thing with character, is that you don't need somebody to develop it for you. You don't necessarily need to go out and read a textbook. You can just reflect and think about this, and just that act alone builds your character. It matches your intention with your actual behavior. Having teenage kids of my own and being a professor with a lot of young students, everything feels very immediate and very important today for a lot of people. And I think reminding them that it's a long trip, and you're just getting started. So it's okay. So I think that's the first thing. And then providing tangible examples of other people that have gone through similar experiences is really important to relate to. If you think your problems are really big, then go look at somebody with a lot bigger problems and how they overcame that, because that's really how we inspire ourselves and achieve that sort of awe and wonder to start the journey. I find that most people, once they start down a path of development, it's an accelerating path, right? You don't necessarily stop when it gets more difficult. You get a little bit more curious and keep taking those steps forward. When I think of accountability, I immediately think of my younger self in the military. The military is a unique sort of philosophy on accountability. It's 100% accountability all the time. And in training, when you make a mistake, you break your integrity, you violate the code of ethics, usually that punishment isn't on the individual, it's on their team, right? You'll be out in freezing rain watching other people do push-ups for hours because of a mistake that you made. And I think that really ingrains this sort of discipline and this integrity to always be accountable. But the flip side of that is that nobody is 100% accountable all the time. So it's interesting in the decisions you make. And I'll share a personal story. When I was in Afghanistan, I was a young soldier, and I was responsible for driving our track light armored vehicle, and my crew was in the back, and we had been out for a very long time, hadn't slept in a while, hadn't had a good meal, missed a shower for a couple weeks, and we were heading back into the camp, and we had stopped. And my job is to always make sure there's fuel in the vehicle. So I checked my gauges, and I had about a quarter of a tank left in the vehicle. And I'm like, oh, that's more than enough for about 8 hours of operation. We're on our way back. It's okay. It's like 38 billion degrees outside. So I'm like, guys, just take a break. We don't need to fuel up. And I ran out of gas. I ran out of gas 100 meters from our gate. And that's not good. That is a really, really, really big mistake. And we put a couple liters of gas in. We got in. No harm, no foul. Everything was fine. But immediately, my commander came up to me and said, you got to be accountable for your actions. Like, what happened? And I was like, well, it must have been my gauges were wrong. I got to get a mechanic in here, and I got to fix this problem, because I certainly didn't do something incredibly stupid, and I did not take accountability for it. And I wasn't punished, and I got away scot-free. But it's been 15 years, and I still remember that moment where I violated my integrity for what? Absolutely nothing. Really, the consequence would have been some sort of light punishment, but I was punishing myself already, so it really wouldn't have mattered. But I violated my own integrity, and it's interesting what that meant in the way I felt my relationships were with my team. I mean, we were in a place where you had to rely on other people for your own well-being, your safety, and you don't have room to be unaccountable. And there's other people that made mistakes in theater, right? You're tired, you're worn out, and it's easy to do that. So you hear about somebody falling asleep on post, or not sending the right message through on the radio or something, and these mistakes happen. But it's how you respond to them that really matters. And fortunately, that was like kind of my only mistake out there. Everything else was fine, but I remember it to this day on, well, what does accountability mean to you? And I'm reminded of it all the time. In my current work, and my current life, it's very hard to be accountable for everything because I have multiple priorities. I have a young family at home. I have a spouse that needs me. I have a day job. I have students in my part-time work, and I'm doing all kinds of other things outside of work. And there's only 24 hours in a day. You're going to lose some things along the way that fall off the desk. So reminding myself every day on what do I need to be accountable to right now? What are my priorities? And where am I going to lose something? And who can I partner with? Who can I collaborate? Where do I need to tap into my humility to say, I don't have this, and go and ask for help? It's very easy, and it's human nature to take shortcuts, especially when we're dealing with like human assessment. And reminding people that they are accountable for their decisions is a very powerful instrument in getting people to second guess the easy choice and really look at what they're doing and activate their judgment. Because even though you would think in an executive staffing process, okay, people are switched on, they're going to be very critical. Well, everyone gets tired. These are long days. There's hours and hours of interviews, countless candidates. You have other work priorities. You have other things going on in your personal life. Somebody reminding you that you're accountable really snaps people back to thinking about judgment and the work they're doing and excellence and the reason and purpose for the things that they're responsible for. And accountability is a very powerful tool. It is interesting because it kind of touches on all dimensions, right? I didn't have the transcendence to see how this problem could unfold. And I didn't have the courage to stand up and take accountability. I didn't have the humility to make a mistake. I didn't have the temperance to stop and think about what the consequences were of not having a vehicle that's fueled up in a war zone. So yeah, there was a lot of things that certainly needed to be unpacked there. But I think that's the interesting thing with character is that when we find a fault, and yes, looking at successes are really good too, but I find you learn more in the mistakes. And with character, you can really unpack the mistakes and unravel them and find areas of each dimension that come through. Sometimes with the successes, you can pick out a few key dimensions that really helped support that judgment. But usually when things go really, really bad, you can find everything to improve on those. So I think the online sessions have a whole bunch of great benefits. One, it gets you thinking about a specific dimension that maybe you put aside for a little bit, and you get to sort of dust that off in your brain and start to think of those examples that maybe you would come up to share. Just like, our talk today on accountability, it gets me thinking of all those times where, I needed to strengthen my accountability. That's a practice and development on its own. I think the sessions are a really great opportunity to meet with people that are thinking about the same thing that you are, and they're on their development journey as well. And we can learn a lot from a community of people, a community of practice, people that are engaged and excited about something. So I've found the sessions absolutely amazing to just hear what people are seeing, what they're developing, and being able to share that experience has been very powerful. For me, the method of what we're doing is always different. Having learned the model, having taught the model, just doing it in a different way gives me ideas on how I can bring that into my practice. And that's really exciting for me, right? Should we do this video or that video, or what did you see here? And those things, literally, I turn around and bring right back into my work the next day. So it's been a very powerful experience for me. Yeah, I think where character sits in my work is in the assessment piece of character. I've spent literally years of my life trying to make better assessments in hiring decisions. And I think a lot of organizations struggle with this. There's a million different ways to look at competencies and to look at commitments. And there's a lot of organizations that are starting to look at character as a selection tool. The things that I've learned along the way are the frameworks for good assessment on competency and commitment are the same frameworks that you need to adopt in good character assessment. So, there's certain innate truths about any type of human assessment. They are only as good as your raters. So developing character in your raters for assessment is a critical first step. And then just some rules, some ground rules, some guidance, some guidelines are very important to make sure that you're applying any type of assessment in a consistent manner. So I know in some of the work that I've done, we've done a lot of bias training, we've done a lot of EDI awareness, making sure that we have diverse boards and raters, making sure that the selection and assessment of competency and commitment has already been done. So you're dealing with qualified people first, and then really, really training people well on how to do an assessment, like how to ask a question and how to actively listen. And what does that say to you? Practice this process over and over and over again so that you really feel strong and comfortable with it, but you're still humble enough to understand that it may not be great, right? You're only as good as your own judgment. So the one thing that I've been working on a fair bit is how to get people to express their decisions, right? How to write a summary of your decisions so that it can stand out and provide feedback to a candidate going through a process. I think this is where character can be a real strength to say, look, when we've had that assessment, these are the things that came out of it, and these are the things that both stand out as strengths and also stand out as some areas of development, and really looking at it as a journey and a process in development as opposed to a barrier to certain levels of employment. And I think that's a huge shift in hiring practices in many organizations. Are we looking at this as a screening process to eliminate people? Or are we looking at this as a process to not just select the right candidates, but to build candidates into the right candidates through this process? And I think that's a bit of a paradigm shift, but that's where character can really be leveraged and strengthened if we sort of look at hiring practices a little bit differently. Yeah, so I've done traditional assessment of character in an interview. It's that's what we're used to. We're used to giving somebody an interview, rating the information they give to us, and then making a decision based on that. And what I'm really excited about is different ways that you can assess character. In our development, we can look at a movie clip and pull it apart and say, like, these are all the things that we see. Well, I see that in writing too. I see that in people's decision making. I see it in ways that are not just a standard interview. And I think making character accessible is something that I'm really excited about. I think that's sort of the next step is, what are the many ways that we can do this in? Mitigating bias and noise in assessment is a very, very important thing that we haven't talked enough about. You can train somebody in character, you can have the most competent rater, but if you don't have guardrails up as to how decisions are made, you don't have governance structures as to who's accountable, right, for what parts of the decision-making process, it can really be variable in the outcome, right? You may not get a strong decision, something that can be defensible.